It was late September when the whole thing happened. I remember because the evenings had started getting cooler, the kind of weather where you needed a hoodie even inside the house. My parents had gone out of town for a wedding, leaving me in charge of the house for just one night. They weren't worried. We lived in a safe, quiet, suburban neighborhood, one of those streets where the biggest excitement was a kid riding his bike too fast down the hill. I was honestly looking forward to it. A night with the whole place to myself. No noise, no one asking me to do chores. Just me, some snacks, and the chance to stay up as late as I wanted. I had plans. Order a pizza, binge a few movies, maybe play some games until I passed out on the couch. The house itself was familiar and comforting. 2 stories, pale siding, a wide front porch where my mom liked to keep plants, and a backyard that stretched into a line of trees. At night, those trees always looked darker than they should, the kind of black where your eyes keep trying to find shapes that aren't really there. But I told myself not to think about it. I wasn't a kid anymore, and I didn't need to spook myself over nothing. For the first few hours, everything was exactly what I wanted. I kept the lights on in the living room, curled up with a blanket, and scrolled on my phone while a movie played in the background. Every once in a while, I'd glance at the window, catching the reflection of my own face staring back at me. Outside, the street was quiet. A car or two rolled past, headlights sweeping across the blinds, then fading into silence again. Around 10 o'clock, I got hungry and decided to call for pizza. The delivery guy showed up about half an hour later. Normal exchange, no big deal. I grabbed the box, thanked him, and went back inside. By then, the night had gone completely still. No cars, no voices, just the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I tried not to think about how empty the house felt when it was only me. My parents' bedroom door was shut upstairs, their absence heavier than I'd expected. I left the TV on just to fill the quiet, even though I wasn't paying attention to it anymore. It was just after 11 when I first noticed something. I had carried the pizza box into the kitchen and was tossing the empty plate in the sink when I heard what sounded like a door hinge moving. A slow, deliberate creak from upstairs. I froze. The house made noises, sure, old pipes, settling wood, that kind of thing. But this didn't sound like that. This was sharper, closer, like the sound of someone easing open a bedroom door just enough to peek out. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the wind, maybe the old frame shifting. But the air in the room changed after that. Heavier, charged, like someone else was there with me, just out of sight. I glanced toward the staircase. The top landing was hidden in shadow, the banister just barely visible in the dim light spilling from the lamp in the living room. I waited, staring, my heartbeat picking up. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no sound at all. After a full minute of silence, I shook my head and laughed nervously at myself. Don't be stupid. I grabbed my drink, went back to the couch, and forced myself to focus on my phone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. I tried to convince myself that I was just imagining things. Houses made noises all the time, especially when you were listening too hard. Still, after that first creak, I couldn't quite relax. The movie I had been watching ended, and I didn't even bother putting on another one. I just sat there scrolling through my phone, the glow of the screen reflecting faintly off the window beside me. Every few seconds, I found myself glancing toward the staircase, as though I expected someone to suddenly appear at the top of it. Nothing happened. No footsteps, no voices. Just that thick, unnatural silence. Around midnight, I decided I was being paranoid. I turned off the TV, locked the front door again just to be sure, and grabbed my phone charger to head upstairs. The lights downstairs spilled a soft yellow glow across the living room, but as soon as I clicked them off, the house felt different. The shadows stretched longer, darker, heavier than before. I climbed the stairs slowly, trying not to notice how every step seemed to creak louder than usual. When I reached the top, I flicked the hallway light on, letting it push back the darkness that seemed to cling to the corners. My bedroom was at the end of the hall, right across from the bathroom. I went inside, shut the door, and tried to tell myself I'd feel better once I was tucked in. I set my phone on the nightstand and pulled the blanket up, scrolling aimlessly to distract myself. After a while, I started to feel silly for letting one little noise get to me. I was about to close my eyes when I heard it again. Creak. Not loud, but unmistakable. It came from the hallway this time, like the sound of someone putting slow, deliberate weight on the wooden floor just outside my room. I sat up, heart thudding, staring at the crack of light under my door. My throat felt tight and dry. Maybe it was the house again. But deep down, I didn't believe that anymore. I waited. Every second felt stretched out, the silence so sharp it made my ears ring. Then, another sound. Not a creak this time, but softer. Like fabric brushing against the wall, the faint drag of clothing when someone shifts their weight. Someone was in the hallway. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone. I thought about calling my parents, but what would I even say? They were hours away, and I didn't want to panic them for no reason. Instead, I opened the flashlight app and pointed it at the door. My chest tightened, half expecting to see the shadow of feet underneath the crack of light. But there was nothing. Just silence again. I told myself I had to check. If I didn't, I wouldn't sleep a second that night. Slowly, I slid out of bed and tiptoed toward the door. My hand hovered over the knob. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear anything on the other side. That was when it happened. A sudden, sharp tap, tap, tap on the other side of the door. 3 quick knocks, no hesitation. I stumbled back, my whole body jolting with adrenaline. The phone almost slipped from my hand. My breathing grew loud in my own ears, ragged and uneven. The knocks didn't come again, just that awful silence. I didn't move for what felt like forever. My eyes darted to the window. 2 stories up, no way I could climb out without breaking my neck. I thought about running down the stairs, but the idea of opening my door now was unthinkable. Finally, I forced myself to whisper, barely loud enough to hear my own voice. "Hello?" No response. My hand shook as I reached for the knob again, every part of me screaming not to do it. But just as I was about to twist it, something stopped me cold. From the hallway just outside my room, I heard a faint, deliberate whisper, low, drawn out. The kind of voice that didn't sound like it was speaking to me, but about me. "He's still awake." For a long moment, I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. That whisper, low, deliberate, almost playful, seemed to sink straight into my skin. My mind scrambled to make sense of it. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe. But no, I knew what I'd heard, clear as if someone had leaned against my door and spoken through it. "He's still awake." I staggered back toward my bed, phone clutched so tightly my knuckles hurt. My heart was hammering so fast I thought it might burst out of my chest. I switched the flashlight back on and pointed it toward the door, the beam shaking violently in my trembling hand. The strip of light beneath the door remained empty. No shadows, no movement. I wanted to call the police. I should have called the police. But I was frozen, convinced that if I made a sound, whoever, or whatever, was out there would hear me. Minutes ticked by. Nothing happened. My ears strained in the silence, catching only the faint hum of the house and the blood rushing in my head. Slowly, my panic dulled just enough for me to think again. I couldn't stay in that room all night. I needed to move. I slipped on my sneakers, shoved my charger and wallet into my pocket, and decided I would make a run for it. Get down the stairs, out the front door, and into the street. From there, I could find help. That was the plan. I crept back toward the door, holding my phone out in front of me like a weapon. My hand closed around the knob. Cold sweat dripped down my back. I twisted it slowly, so slowly I thought the click would give me away. Then, in one swift motion, I yanked the door open and pointed the flashlight beam into the hallway. Empty. The long stretch of carpet glowed pale under the light. Every door shut, except the bathroom across from me. The air was still, thick, heavy. I stepped out, forcing my breath to stay quiet. I moved fast, my footsteps as light as I could manage, heading for the stairs. Halfway down the hall, I froze. The bathroom door was open. Just a crack, no more than an inch. I knew for certain it had been closed earlier. My light hovered on it, the gap blacker than the rest of the hallway. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I edged closer, every nerve in my body screaming to turn back. When I was just a few feet away, I lifted the flashlight and shone it straight at the gap. What I saw made my stomach drop. An eye. A single human eye, staring through the crack. Wide open, unblinking, locked directly on me. I gasped and stumbled back, the light jerking wildly across the walls. By the time I steadied it and aimed at the door again, it was shut, completely shut. My legs shook so hard I almost collapsed. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I bolted for the stairs. Each step groaned under my weight as I tore down them, the beam of my phone bouncing across the walls. I reached the bottom, sprinted through the living room, and grabbed for the front door handle. But the moment my hand touched it, my stomach turned to ice. The chain lock was slid into place. I never used that lock. My parents always left it off unless we were all home at night, which meant someone had put it there from inside. My hands fumbled as I tried to pull it free. My breathing grew frantic, chest heaving. Behind me, I thought I heard it again. Soft fabric shifting. Footsteps on the stairs. Slow. Patient. I yanked at the chain, the metal scraping loudly against the frame. Finally, it came loose. I threw the door open, but before I could step outside, a voice floated down from the top of the stairs. Not a whisper this time. Calm. Certain. You shouldn't go out there. I froze in the doorway, one foot on the porch, one still inside. The cool night air rushed against my face, but the voice, so calm, so sure, kept me rooted to the spot. You shouldn't go out there. It drifted down from the top of the stairs, spoken like a fact, not a warning. I didn't dare look back. If I turned my head, I was terrified I would see something staring right at me. My pulse hammered in my ears, my chest rising and falling in short, shallow bursts. Then behind me, another sound, a soft creak, followed by the faintest shuffle of fabric, like someone leaning against the banister. That broke me. I bolted. I didn't stop to lock the door, didn't care about leaving the lights on. I just tore across the porch, down the steps, and sprinted barefoot into the street. My breath came in ragged gasps, the world around me a blur of shadows and dim porch lights. I aimed for the nearest house, the one just 2 doors down. My legs burned, but I didn't stop until I reached their front porch. I pounded on the door with both fists, over and over, desperate, frantic. Please, open the door. Please, let me in. The house was dark. For a second, I thought no one was home. My throat tightened, panic clawing up from my chest. Then, at last, I heard movement inside, footsteps rushing toward the door, a light flicking on in the hallway. The door opened just a crack, the chain still latched. An older woman peered out, her eyes wide with confusion and alarm. What on earth? Please, I gasped, gripping the frame. There's someone in my house. Something in my voice must have convinced her. She shut the door briefly, and I heard the rattle of the chain being slid off. When it opened again, she motioned me inside quickly. The warmth of another house hit me all at once, but I didn't feel safe. Not really. My hands shook as I tried to explain, stumbling over my words, every detail spilling out too fast. She listened, her expression stiffening, her hand tightening around the edge of the door. When I mentioned the whisper, her eyes flicked nervously toward the street outside. You did the right thing coming here, she said finally, though her voice trembled. You stay put. Don't even look out the window. I sank onto the couch, still trembling, still struggling to catch my breath. My ears strained for any sound outside, half expecting footsteps to follow me down the street. Then the woman's husband appeared from the back, pulling on a jacket, his face pale but determined. He didn't waste time with questions. He just said quietly to his wife, "It's happening again." I stared at him, confused. What do you mean, again? But he didn't answer. He just moved to the window, pulling the curtain back an inch, his jaw clenched. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "He's standing out there, right in front of your house." I didn't want to look. Every part of me screamed not to. But sitting there on my neighbor's couch, trembling and clutching the blanket the woman had draped over my shoulders, I couldn't stop myself. I rose slowly, my legs heavy as stone, and joined her husband at the window. He had only pulled the curtain back a sliver, but it was enough. From their front room, you had a clear view down the street. My house sat under the dim, flickering glow of an old street lamp. And there, dead center in the front yard, stood the figure, tall, thin, unmoving. Even from a distance, I could see the posture, rigid, unnatural, like the body didn't quite belong to the way a person should stand. Its head was tilted slightly upward, angled toward the window where we were watching. The man beside me muttered under his breath, "Don't move the curtain. Don't let him know you're looking." But it was already too late. As though on cue, the figure raised one arm, slow, deliberate, and pointed directly at the house we were in. I stumbled back from the window, my throat tightening. Why is he doing this? Who is that?" Neither of them answered. The woman had gone pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the hem of her sweater. Her husband dropped the curtain and turned to me with a grim, resigned look. "This isn't the first time," he said quietly. "Not by a long shot." He told me that over the past few years, people on the street had seen the same figure, always late at night, always standing still under the streetlight. Sometimes it was in front of their house, sometimes across the street, but always watching. And whenever anyone tried to confront it, it would disappear, slip away like smoke. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. No, he was inside. He was in my house. I heard him. I saw his eye through the door. The man raised a hand, cutting me off. His expression darkened. "That's new." The weight of those words sank into me like ice water. For the next hour, we sat in silence. The three of us barely breathed, listening to the creaks of the house and the occasional hum of a car passing far away. Every so often, I thought I heard something outside, the faint crunch of footsteps on pavement, the whisper of fabric shifting. Each time, the man would peek through the curtain and mutter, "Still there." Time crawled. At some point, exhaustion began to weigh on me, but I couldn't close my eyes. The thought of waking to find him standing right outside the window kept me alert, every nerve on edge. It was close to 4 in the morning when the husband finally looked again and whispered, "He's gone. Gone." I didn't know if that was a relief or something worse. The couple insisted I stay with them until daylight, and I didn't argue. When the first weak sunlight began to spill across the street, I gathered the courage to return to my house with the man walking beside me. The front door was still open, swinging gently in the morning breeze. Inside, everything looked the same at first, quiet, still, untouched. But when I stepped into the living room, my stomach dropped. Across the wooden floor, just near the bottom of the stairs, were marks, long, thin gouges, as though something sharp had been dragged across the grain. 5 of them, perfectly spaced, like the scrape of fingers. I couldn't stay. I grabbed what I needed, shoved it into a bag, and left. My parents never questioned why I refused to spend another night alone in that house. But the neighbors, they knew. Sometimes, even now, I think back to that night. I try to convince myself it was just some stranger, someone who slipped in unnoticed and left before help could arrive. But then I remember the way he stood, unnaturally still, the way he whispered from behind the door, the way his eyes stared through the crack, unblinking. And I remember the way the neighbor's husband said it, not in shock, not in disbelief, but in resignation. "That's new,"